The wine glass didn't even break when it hit the floor. That annoyed me. It should have shattered, like in movies, dramatic, final. But it just bounced once, rolled under the counter, and left a pink trail of Merlot across the tile. And that's when she said it. "Can we not do this tonight, please?" Her voice, calm, tired, like I was the problem again. Like I wasn't standing there holding her phone, reading a text that said, "Next weekend's perfect. I'll tell him I'm visiting my sister." My wife, pretending to have a sister. I couldn't even speak. My mouth opened, but nothing came out except this ridiculous little squeak, like a kettle left on too long. She didn't even flinch. She just reached for a towel, cleaned the floor, and asked if I wanted her to open another bottle. That's when I realized she wasn't scared. She wasn't guilty. She was bored. I laughed. Not a real laugh. That ugly, desperate one that sounds like choking on air. She rolled her eyes, muttered something about drama, and went upstairs. And I just stood there, in socks soaked with wine, heart beating like a dying engine, trying to convince myself that maybe, I misunderstood. But I hadn't, because an hour earlier, while she was in the shower, I'd seen it all. The hotel booking under her maiden name, the photos in her hidden folder, the playlist she made titled "For When I'm With Him." I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered to myself, over and over, "She thinks I don't know. She thinks I'm clueless." And the funny part? I decided to let her keep thinking that, to watch her smile and plan and lie right to my face. Because when the time came, when I finally dropped the line I'd been practicing in my head, "Let him know you'll be free next week. I'll handle the divorce papers." I wanted to see her freeze, not because of rage, but because she'd finally realize I was never clueless, just patient. The next morning, I performed a test I never told anyone about. I took her favorite mug, the stupid one with the hand-painted mushrooms she got at some overpriced art fair, and moved it to the wrong shelf. One shelf higher. That was it. Just a tiny little move. Insignificant, right? Wrong. I left it there all morning while I sat at the kitchen table pretending to work, headphones in, nothing playing. She came down in her robe, hair in a towel, scrolling on her phone, humming that song again, the one I now know he sent her. When she opened the cabinet, she paused, just for a second, looked confused, then closed it and grabbed another mug without saying a word. That pause confirmed everything I needed to know. She's living in two realities. One where I'm the oblivious husband, and another where she's a free woman playing house while sneaking off to hotels under fake names. I wanted her to say something. I wanted her to ask, "Did you move my mug?" Something small, something human, something real. But she didn't. Instead, she sat across from me, sipping her tea from the blue mug she hates, legs crossed like nothing was wrong. I almost respected the performance. Almost. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I didn't answer emails. I just stared at her across the house, trying to figure out what version of me she actually sees. Is it the man she married, the nervous, stuttering dork who still flinches when opening bills? Or is it the pathetic, safe background character she keeps around to make her lies look stable? I used to think she liked that I was sensitive, that I cried during Pixar movies and overcooked pasta because I couldn't stop overthinking the instructions. But maybe she just tolerated it until someone like him came along. Whoever he is. Later that night, while she was brushing her teeth, I opened the Notes app on my phone and titled a new entry, "Her Lies." I started documenting everything. The changed pin on her phone. The weird charge from a boutique hotel 2 towns over. The fact that she told me her mom was sick last Thursday, but her mom posted a photo from a bowling alley that same night with the caption, "Girls' Night." I screenshotted everything, emailed it to myself, and put it in a folder called Trash Bag Evidence. I'm not a vengeful man by nature, but I am thorough when I'm hurt. She came into the bedroom after and slipped under the covers like always. Asked me why I was still awake. I told her I had a headache. She offered to get me Tylenol, and for a second, I almost caved. Almost told her everything. But instead, I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "No, thanks. I'll just sleep it off." I didn't sleep. I laid there, next to the woman I once thought would grow old with me, and imagined what I'd say the moment I was ready to let her world fall apart. I practiced it again, silently mouthing the words like an actor in a mirror. "Let him know you'll be free next week. I'll handle the divorce papers." And in the dark, I almost smiled, because she still had no idea I knew. But she would. Soon. 2 days later, she told me she'd be volunteering at the animal shelter that afternoon. A sentence so specific and wholesome it practically begged not to be questioned. I nodded like I always do, pretending to believe it, though I knew the shelter had shut down temporarily due to renovations. I knew this because I'd called. Twice. The second time I pretended to be interested in adopting a three-legged cat named Waffles, just to make sure I wasn't crazy. Spoiler, I'm not crazy. So I followed her. Yes, I know how that sounds. Yes, it's pathetic. No, I don't care. I waited 15 minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys, put on the same hoodie I wore in college, the one she said made me look softer in the wrong places, and drove after her, keeping 2 cars back like I'd seen in bad detective movies. I felt stupid, but I also felt powerful. Like for once I wasn't the one being lied to. I was the one watching. She didn't go to a hotel, or to a man's house. That would have made sense. That would have fit the narrative I had already carved into my brain. No, she went to a 2-story suburban home on the edge of a cul-de-sac, the kind of place with wind chimes and plastic flamingos and a mailbox shaped like a barn. I parked across the street and waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Just as I was convincing myself to drive away and pretend I hadn't seen anything, she came back out, holding something. It was a small cardboard box. Light blue. She clutched it like it was fragile. She didn't get back into her car right away. She just stood there, staring down at it, before finally opening the passenger door and placing it carefully inside. Then she looked around. Her eyes scanned the street, and for one terrifying second, I thought she saw me. But she didn't. She just climbed into her car and drove off. I didn't follow her this time. My hands were sweating so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I waited until she was gone, then did the unthinkable. I approached the house. I don't know what I expected. A man to answer the door? A kid? An elderly woman confused about why some twitchy guy in a ratty hoodie was standing on her porch? I got none of that. The house was empty. Curtains drawn. No lights. But just as I turned to leave, I noticed something wedged between the screen door and the frame. A photograph. It was a Polaroid, slightly curled at the edges, like it had been there a while. I picked it up with shaking hands and stared at it. My wife, sitting on a bench, smiling. Next to her, a teenage boy. He looked nothing like me. The date on the photo was written in blue marker. March 11th, 2009. I did the math. That was 4 years before we met. She never told me about having a kid. Never mentioned this boy. There was no trace of him anywhere in our house. No pictures, no keepsakes, not even a casual reference over dinner. And yet there he was, clear as day, arms slung around her shoulders like he'd done it 1,000 times. I stood there for a full minute before I noticed the writing on the back. You promised. That was it. 2 words. You promised. My stomach twisted in a way I can't even describe. Everything I thought I knew was fracturing. It wasn't just about cheating anymore. This was something else. Something deeper. Something she buried so far down I'd never even caught a glimpse, until now. I drove home without turning on the radio. My ears rang the whole way. When I walked through the front door, she was on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, watching a documentary like nothing happened. She smiled at me, asked if I wanted Thai or Indian for dinner. I chose Thai, but inside, I was unraveling. The Polaroid was in my back pocket, burning through the denim like a secret screaming to be heard. And I started to think that maybe I hadn't even scratched the surface of her betrayal. This wasn't just about another man. This was about the person she used to be, and what she might be hiding from him, from me, and from herself. I didn't ask her about the boy. Not that night. Not the next morning. I kept it tucked behind my teeth like a shard of glass, slicing me every time I swallowed. She carried on like usual, cereal in the morning, light yoga, vague comments about client calls that didn't seem to involve an actual phone. She even kissed me on the cheek before heading out to run errands. I smiled, waved, told her not to forget oat milk. The moment the door shut, I pulled out the Polaroid again. My hands were shaking like I'd had 3 espressos. That kid, that boy, his face haunted me. The familiarity was there, just out of reach. I didn't recognize him, but there was something off about how close they looked. Not just physically close, intimate, worn in, like family. But that made no sense. She told me once she was an only child, raised by a single mom. No cousins, no siblings, no secret stepsons, or anything dramatic like that. She told me everything, or so I thought, and that's what really gutted me. I didn't even know who I was married to. The more I stared at the photo, the more I realized I didn't know her at all. That day, I made a decision I never imagined making in my life. I Googled my wife. Her full name, her maiden name, even her boutique's business registration. It was like looking up a ghost. Sparse information, outdated addresses, nothing concrete. Until I stumbled on an archived article from a local newspaper in Oregon. 2010. Missing boy, 15, still not found after 2 weeks. Mother appeals for public help. The photo they used? The same Polaroid. Same bench. Same clothes. Except this time, his face was circled in red, with his name printed underneath in faded black ink, Elias Rowan. And standing next to him, barely cropped out of the frame, was the woman I married. Only the caption didn't say Juniper. It said, Hannah Rowan, mother. I dropped my phone. Literally. It fell to the hardwood and clattered so loud one of the rats squeaked from the other room. I picked it up, hard in my throat, and reread the article 3 times. Then I opened our wedding certificate. Name, Juniper Elaine Cass. She'd changed it. Legally, somehow. A full identity shift. And she never told me a damn word. I felt like my bones were made of paper. My entire marriage was built on sand. I thought cheating was the worst thing she could have done. But this was something else entirely. She hadn't just lied to me, she'd erased herself. Buried her past so deeply that even a decade later, I could barely find fragments of it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room felt smaller than it had 10 minutes ago. I paced like a lunatic, muttering to myself, trying to make it all make sense. Why would she do this? Why fake an identity? Why abandon the name connected to a missing child? What happened to Elias? I started writing down everything I remembered about her over the years. Things that now seemed too perfect, too rehearsed. The way she avoided talking about high school. How she claimed all her childhood photos were lost in a fire. The way she hated family events. All of it clicked now, like puzzle pieces forced into place, finally snapping into their correct slots. When she came home that afternoon, holding oat milk and humming that same song, I looked at her like she was a stranger. Because she was. And yet, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because now I wasn't just dealing with a cheater. I was married to a woman who used to be someone else entirely. A woman whose son vanished, whose name disappeared from records, and who somehow started over without a trace. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a cover-up. And if I played this wrong, I had the creeping feeling that I wouldn't just lose my marriage. I might lose everything. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick, which wasn't technically a lie. My head felt like it had cracked in half and filled with static. I kept hearing that name over and over in my brain like a song I couldn't turn off. Hannah Rowan. Hannah Rowan. Hannah Rowan. My wife. No, the woman I thought was my wife had an entire other name, and no one in her current life knew it. Not her coworkers, not our mutual friends, not even me. It was like she'd quietly erased herself from the world and drawn a new version from scratch. But why? I couldn't ask her. Not yet. She was too calm, too polished. If I confronted her now, she'd spin it, twist it into something I'd end up apologizing for. She was good at that, at flipping the board mid-game and making me question whether I even understood the rules. I needed something solid, something undeniable. So I did what any desperate, emotionally fraying husband would do. I went to the library, not to read, to dig. There's something about a public library's local archive section that feels like a portal to forgotten truths. The kind of place where old, unwanted stories go to sleep, unless someone like me wakes them up. I drove 2 hours to a dusty town in Oregon, the one listed in that 2010 news article, and pretended I was doing research for a true crime podcast. It worked. The woman at the counter, whose name tag read Marla, and whose voice sounded like she'd smoked since the Nixon administration, lit up like I'd just told her she was going to be famous. "You looking into the Rowan case?" she asked before I'd even mentioned a name. "Whole town used to talk about that one. Spooked people something awful." I nodded, trying not to visibly shake. She led me to a back room with filing cabinets and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped bee. The files were old, yellowed, and smelled like mildew, but I dug through them for hours, flipping page after page until I hit something I didn't expect. It was a letter, unpublished, written by a woman named Denise Calder, a neighbor of Hannah Rowan back in 2009. It was typed and signed, but paper-clipped to a complaint form about disturbances coming from the Rowan household. The letter detailed what Denise claimed she witnessed, screaming, mostly. Loud arguments at night. One line hit me so hard I had to sit down to keep from falling. The boy often climbed out the second-story window at night. He told my grandson he was afraid of his mother when she got in her dark moods. Once, he had bruises. Said he fell off his bike. No one believed him. I wish I'd done more. The boy, Elias. My wife, Juniper. Hannah. I felt sick. I reread it again and again, trying to absorb the full weight of what it implied. She had a son who vanished. A son who feared her. And now, over a decade later, she had reinvented herself. Found me, married me, and never once let any of that pain surface. What kind of person does that? What kind of person builds a second life on top of a tragedy? I asked Marla if she remembered anything else. She lit another cigarette, somehow still indoors, and gave me a long look. You know what's weird? She said. That woman disappeared right after the case went cold. No forwarding address. Just gone. Like she knew no one was going to ask questions anymore. I left that library with a folder full of photocopies and a pit in my stomach the size of an open grave. The sky was gray as I drove home. I didn't play music. I didn't even stop for gas, even though the needle was blinking red. I just wanted to get home before she did. When I walked in, she was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. It smelled like tomato and basil. She smiled when she saw me, as if I hadn't just spent the entire day unraveling the deepest lie a person could hide. You're home early, she said. I kissed her on the forehead and said, yeah, just didn't feel like being out today. And inside my mind, I was screaming, because the woman I kissed wasn't who she said she was. And now, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was the only person alive who knew what she'd buried. I didn't sleep again. I laid next to her, watching the red numbers of the digital clock change, wondering if she could feel the shift in the air, the weight of me knowing. I kept imagining how she'd react if she woke up and saw my eyes open. Would she know I'd figured it out? Or would she just smile that sweet, sleepy smile and ask if I was having one of my existential episodes again? She liked calling them that. Episodes. Like I was a sitcom with a laugh track playing behind my suffering. But that night, there was no laugh track. Just the sound of her slow, peaceful breathing while I stared at the ceiling with my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The next morning, something strange happened. I was in the middle of making toast, real toast, not the usual granola crap she insisted on, when my phone buzzed on the counter. No caller ID. Just block number and a timestamp. I don't normally answer those, but something in me, maybe the same part that found that Polaroid, that drove to Oregon, that kept a file labeled trash bag evidence, told me to hit play. It wasn't a live call. It was a voicemail, exactly 49 seconds long. No one spoke at first, just a low rustling, like someone holding the phone at their side. Then a shaky breath. Then, finally, a voice. Male. Young. Probably late teens or early 20s. Barely above a whisper. She's not who you think she is. I don't know how much you know or how you found me, but if you're listening to this, you're already too close. She lies. All the time. About everything. I'm not dead. Not yet. But if she finds out I left this message, I won't be anything anymore. My blood turned to ice. I dropped the toast on the floor and replayed the voicemail 3 times. The voice wasn't familiar, but the fear in it was real. Raw. Like he was saying something he hadn't dared say out loud for years. I backed away from the phone like it might explode. The boy, Elias, wasn't dead. He wasn't dead, but everyone thought he was. The news reports, the missing posters, the cold case files. Even Marla at the library said the trail had gone cold. But if this voicemail was real, then it meant everything I thought I knew was wrong in a much worse way. Not only had my wife faked her identity, not only had she lied about her past, she had actively hidden someone who was very much alive. Why? Why would a mother do that? I sat down on the kitchen floor, toast still face down near my foot, and tried to breathe. My heart was sprinting. I tried calling the number back. Blocked, of course. I ran it through a lookup app, but it just came back as unlisted. I checked my call log to make sure I hadn't hallucinated it. Nope. 49 seconds. It was real. When she came downstairs 15 minutes later, she was humming. Again. Always that same tune. It was light and airy, something that sounded like it belonged in a whimsical indie movie. I couldn't even look at her. Not without seeing that voicemail play on loop behind my eyes. You okay? She asked. You look pale. I told her I had a bad dream. That maybe the toast gave me indigestion. She laughed. That's what happens when you eat like a raccoon. Then she kissed the top of my head and walked out the door like she hadn't ever erased a life. Like she hadn't possibly hidden a living, terrified son from the world, from me. I wanted to scream the truth at her, to slam my phone on the table and play the voicemail until her eyes stopped pretending. But I didn't, because I needed to know more. I needed to find him. The boy in the photo. The boy with the voicemail. The ghost who never really disappeared. That afternoon, I called the only person who could possibly help me track someone who didn't want to be found. My brother. He owed me a favor, a big one, from an ugly situation we never talk about. He used to work in digital forensics. The real kind, not the TV show nonsense. I told him I needed to find someone, quickly, quietly, and that I couldn't tell him why. He said one thing before hanging up. If this comes back to bite me, you better make sure it doesn't have teeth. I didn't know how to answer that, so I said nothing. Because if I was right, if this voicemail was real, then my wife hadn't just been lying to me. She was covering something up that could destroy everything. And I had no idea how far she was willing to go to keep it buried. The address came through at 2:14 a.m. while I was lying on the couch pretending to sleep. I didn't even hear the ping. I just happened to look at my phone and see a message from my brother, a single Google Maps pin with one line of text beneath it. That's where the number originated. East Ridge. Be careful. East Ridge. I'd never heard of it. It wasn't a city, just a pocket of dirt road isolation buried an hour outside of civilization. The kind of place where people don't bother locking their doors because they assume no one's crazy enough to come looking. Except I was. I didn't even wait for the sun. I threw on a hoodie, shoved a few snack bars in my glove box, and left her a note that said I was going to visit my dad. He's been dead for 3 years. I wanted to see if she'd pretend to forget that. The roads got worse the deeper I drove. First gravel, then dust, then nothing but cracked soil that threatened to shred my tires. It was barely 6 a.m. when I pulled up to the house. It looked like it had been dropped out of a different decade. 2 stories, faded yellow paint, green shutters hanging crooked off their hinges, and a porch swing that creaked in the wind even though the air was still. A rusted Ford pickup was parked to the side. No license plate. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, engine running, wondering what the hell I thought I was doing. What was my plan here? Knock on the door and say what? Hi. I think your mother is pretending to be someone else and possibly fake your death while building a new life with me. Mind if we chat? But I had come too far, and I couldn't turn back now. I killed the engine, stepped out, and made my way to the porch. The boards creaked under my feet. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I heard it. A voice. Quiet. From behind the door. Who sent you? I froze. I got a message. A voicemail. I think you're Elias. Silence. Then, the slow click of the lock turning. The door opened barely a crack, just enough for one pale eye to meet mine. You shouldn't be here, he said. The same voice. Older now. Raspy, hollow. If she finds out. I know, I interrupted, voice shaking. I'm married to her. I didn't know. I didn't know who she really was until a week ago. I swear. Another pause. Then, slowly, he opened the door wide enough for me to step in. The inside of the house was dim, lit only by natural light creeping through dirty blinds. No furniture except for a worn-out couch, an old TV on the floor, and piles of notebooks stacked on every flat surface. He looked nothing like the boy in the photo anymore. Taller, thinner, eyes sunken like someone who hadn't slept right in years. He couldn't have been more than 25, but he looked 40. I don't talk to people, he said, shutting the door. I don't let them in. You're the first. I nodded. Why did you leave the voicemail? Because I saw her, he said quietly. A month ago. She came here. Didn't knock. Just stood at the tree line, staring. She was watching to make sure I was still gone. That I hadn't told anyone. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photograph. It was her. My wife. Standing beneath a tree, half-shadowed, staring at the house. Like a ghost caught on camera. She doesn't want anyone knowing what happened. Not to me. Not to my dad. I blinked. Your dad. He looked at me then, dead in the eyes, and I saw it. That look I'd seen in the mirror 100 times. Betrayal melted down into something colder than grief. She didn't just lie about me, he whispered. She lied about him too. He didn't leave us. That's what she told people, that he ran off. But he didn't. She got rid of him. She made it look like an accident. She told me never to talk about it again. My mouth was completely dry. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I ran away, Elias continued. I was 15. She caught me once. Brought me back. That's when she hit me. Harder than before. Told me if I left again, she'd do to me what she did to him. So I waited. I planned. And then one day, I vanished. No one came looking. I felt like the floor was shifting beneath me. Like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare and couldn't wake up. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but they all fought each other in my throat. She doesn't love people, he said, almost like he was reading my mind. She controls them, breaks them down until they can't tell what's real. And when they finally start to see through her, she disappears. Reinvents. Like she did with you. He handed me a manila envelope. Everything I have. Records, photos, copies of reports. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you're too close now to just walk away. And then he opened the door again. That was it. Conversation over. As I walked back to my car, envelope under my arm, I looked back one more time. Elias was still standing there, framed in the doorway like a shadow in the shape of a man. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever I thought I was going to say to her, let him know you'll be free next week, I'll handle the divorce papers, was no longer enough. This wasn't about divorce anymore. This was about survival. I didn't go home right away. I parked at a gas station 2 towns over and just sat there, engine running, envelope still on the passenger seat like it was radioactive. I didn't open it. Not yet. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would confirm. That my marriage had been a performance from day one, a well-rehearsed script by a woman who had written herself a new life over someone else's grave. Or maybe 2. The boy hadn't lied. I saw it in his eyes, the kind of fear you don't fake, the kind you carry like scar tissue. But despite everything, I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I expected to be. I wasn't burning for revenge or some climactic confrontation that would end in screaming. I just felt done. Tired. I had been walking around for years with my arms wide open, asking to be loved, begging to be chosen, and she, whoever she truly was, saw that and molded herself into the version of love I wanted most. That wasn't just manipulation. That was surgical, and it hurt, deeply, but it also meant I could finally let go of the illusion. I went home just after dark. The lights were on. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone, wearing the hoodie she always stole from me. I looked at her for a long time from the hallway, the way you might look at a painting you used to love, not realizing until now that you'd misunderstood what it was showing you the entire time. When she looked up, she smiled. Hey, you okay? You were gone a while. I didn't answer right away. I just walked over, set the envelope on the coffee table between us, and sat down across from her. She glanced at it, then at me. What's this? I finally spoke. Calm. Clear. No yelling. It's the part of your life you erased. The part you thought no one would ever find. Her face didn't flinch. Not right away. She was still trying to read the room, to scan my tone, gauge if this was a joke or some elaborate emotional stunt. But when I didn't move, when I didn't blink, I watched something shift behind her eyes. That calculation she always did, the wheels turning behind the charm, slowed. Then stopped. She didn't open the envelope. She didn't have to. And I didn't tell her what was inside. I let the silence do the talking. After a long moment, she whispered, "You don't understand what happened." It wasn't like, "I don't need to understand." I cut in gently. "Because I don't trust anything you'd say anymore. And I don't hate you, Juniper. Or Hannah. Or whatever your name is. I'm done living in a life that doesn't belong to me." She said nothing. I stood up. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. In the morning, I'll have someone come by to help me collect my things. After that, you won't hear from me again." Still, she didn't move. She just stared at the envelope like it was ticking. I left her there, in that curated little world she'd built, surrounded by carefully chosen throw pillows, a fake name, and a man who used to love her with his whole stupid heart. And I didn't cry. Not this time. The hotel I checked into had terrible wallpaper and scratchy towels, but the bed was mine. The quiet was mine. I slept through the night for the first time in months. The next morning, I texted my brother one word: safe. Then I opened my laptop, emailed a lawyer, and made an appointment. No drama. No scandal. Just a quiet exit from a life that never really belonged to me. And a week later, when I checked my phone, there was one final message from a blocked number. Just a photo. Elias, standing in the sun, holding a rescue dog, smiling for the first time in years. No caption, no words. But I got it. He was free now. So was I?